There is no power crisis, only a crisis of ignorance. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We meet you live from Stein Studios in Ratmalani yet again on a Monday, 9:30 p.m. live. While some of you are very fortunate to watch us live tonight on your television sets, most of you are literally in the dark. Tonight, our topic of discussion is about the power crisis plaguing Sri Lanka at present. The Minister of Power and Energy gave us an assurance stating that there would be no further power cuts beginning Wednesday, that is the 10th of April 2019. How far is this practical? Are we facing an energy crisis at present as we speak? To discuss all this and more, we've invited 4 guests to our studios this evening as usual. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us this evening on the show is Dr. Vidura Ralapanava, Energy Sector Specialist. Nice to have you on board, Vidura. As always, Vidura is no stranger to the show. Also joining us tonight on the show is Kanchana Sirivardhana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Nice to have you on board as well, Kanchana. Also joining us tonight on the show is Dr. Santa Pereira, Deputy General Manager, Sri Lanka Electricity Board and past President of the Engineers Union of the CEB. Nice to have you on board as well, Dr. Pereira. Also joining us tonight on the show is Lakmal Fernando, Secretary, Solar Industrial Association. Nice to have you on board as well, Lakmal. So let's start off tonight's show with Kanchana Sirivardhana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Kanchana, the Ceylon Electricity Board has not submitted its daily power generation report since May 27th last year. Am I correct to say that?
Correct.
And the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka waited until the 4th of March this year to go to courts and file a case against the Ceylon Electricity Board. Why wait until the power crisis happened to go to courts? The time starts now.
I think the power crisis, of course, has been there for about 5-6 years now. So it's not a new thing for us, because we know time after time the plans that were there were not implemented on time. So as a result, this is expected. I mean, we have already informed this to the government in 2016. March 2016, we have wrote to the Secretary, Ministry of Power and Energy, saying that there will be a power issue in 2018 or 19 and beyond. So this is not a new thing for us. So
no, but why wait until the last minute? Because it seems like the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka is washing their hands on top of the Ceylon Electricity Board's head at present. And that's what it seems like. So do you have an answer to that, Kanchana?
No, regarding data submissions, of course, we have had delays and hiccups in data submissions before as well. So we have been being very patient and giving them some time, because there was a claim of a trade union issue and no cooperation with us by the Sri Lanka Electricity Board Engineers Union. So we gave them some time to respond, and several reminders were sent. So this is the last action we took.
And you all waited until the power crisis really hit Sri Lanka again, right on their face, to go to courts and...
Actually, since the data was not there, we were not in a position to assess whether there will be a power shortage in March this year. That exact dates were not known to us. So we were like a bit in the dark in that regard. So this is not known to us, I think not known to many people in the power sector or the government.
But what is the role of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka when it comes to power generation, giving away dissemination of power to the general public at large?
So we, as the regulator, is supposed to issue licenses for generation, transmission and distribution of power. So as part of transmission licenses activities, they are supposed to come up with generation expansion plans, the long-term plans. So we are required to approve it, scrutinize it and approve it. So and monitor the implementation of those plans.
In your opinion, Kanchana, what went wrong? Why do you think the CEB refrained from giving you the data?
Probably they didn't want us to have information so that we will be keep going on, questioning them again and again and reminding them that the plans are not done on time. So they didn't
But
want us to.
mustn't the Public Utilities Commission and the Ceylon Electricity Board work hand in hand in order to get the best out of the two institutions?
No, we've had that relationship throughout. I'm not saying there's nothing like that.
And then you all decided to go to courts.
I think because, since 2018 May, we have not been getting data. So it's a long time.
Thank you very much, Kanchan Sirivardhana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Dr. Santa Pereira, Deputy General Manager, Ceylon Electricity Board, and one-time past President of the Engineers Union of the Ceylon Electricity Board as well. I am known to believe that Dr. Santa Pereira would be made the additional General Manager of the CEB in a week from now. So has a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. The power crisis somewhat is now in your shoulders, Dr. Pereira. Were you surprised when the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka went to courts on the 4th of March this year, when the CEB had not given them the data which was required to be given to them under the PUSL Act number 35 of 2002?
Well, yes and no, because under the PUCSL Act, they have the right to take anybody to courts, if they do not comply with certain provisions of the PUCSL Act. But I'm surprised because in 2018, there was a cabinet decision taken by, I think it was proposed by the president, that if there's a dispute between two government entities, they will not go to courts, but they will try to settle it with the intervention of the Attorney General. Right? So much so that, even after PUCSL went to courts on this matter, Cabinet has reaffirmed this decision, and I believe has advised PUCSL to refrain from taking legal action without first referring to the Attorney General. Now, I think the broader question you asked earlier was, what's the role of the PUCSL or the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, right? Why do you need a regulator for the electricity sector, right? Because this role had been traditionally given to the government, the cabinet and the line ministry. But in 2002, this act was passed, and the Public Utilities Commission came into being, and they started the regulatory acts, I think, probably much later than that. So why do you need them, right? That is because primarily everyone wanted an independent organization which would oversee the electricity sector. Not only electricity, I think there are other sectors in the energy sector, like petroleum and even water, what we broadly term utilities, that they are supposed to oversee. But at the moment, they are only looking after the electricity sector for whatever reason.
But the question is, Dr. Pereira, is not about the role of the PUSL or the role of the Ceylon Electricity Board. The question right now is that people are literally living in the dark because of the actions of either CEB or the PUSL.
Right.
Now you have a minister who's saying that subsequent to the 10th of April, we will not have power cuts. How so?
No, it's very easy to, I think, in a way, to assign the blame to one party or the other. But I think you have to look at it broadly, and whose responsibility it is ultimately to ensure that there are no power cuts.
Who's responsible?
Is it CEB? Is it PUCSL? I believe at the end of the day it has to be the government, because the government has the ultimate responsibility to ensure that people of this country have sufficient power, right? If one takes the position that okay, CEB has not doing its job, that is why you are in this mess today. Yes, but CEB is a government entity. So if CEB was not doing its job, the government should have taken over and somehow made sure that okay, there is enough capacity. Because like Kanchana said, there had been enough warnings. Not only PUCSL, CEB itself has, time and again since 2016 or even before that, have been predicting that, there's going to be a shortage of power.
But your question, I understand I understand where you're coming from, Dr. Pereira, but you say the government is held accountable or responsible, but let's take a look at this government alone. Since 2015, they've had 5 ministers manning the Ministry of Power and Energy.
Yes.
And how long have you been working for the CEB now?
How
long have you been attached to the Sri Lanka Electricity Board now?
This is my 35th year.
35th year. So it's very evident that individuals or those who are working within CEB has not changed, but governments have changed.
Yes.
If we take a look at since 2005 or 2006, when the Sampur coal power plant matter came up to play,
okay,
it was only in 2016 this was halted. So there was 3 governments in play at that time.
So who made that decision? Was it CEB or was it the government?
But isn't the CEB responsible for most of these issues that are taking place?
Such as?
Of course, the government can't give the data to the PUSL, can they?
No, this crisis had nothing to do with the data.
But the PUSL just mentioned, Kanchana just mentioned that because of the lack of data that they because of the lack of data,
okay,
they couldn't predict the power crisis that we are.
No, they didn't have to predict it. They had. I mean, he also said that they have warned the government since 2016. So had CEB. So had everybody else. Now, if Dr. Sieblapiti was here, he would tell you that he had written so many times in the papers, what is going to happen. So there were independent people also who had been telling the government, you had to do something. Okay. My question is, okay, if the government tried to do something and if somebody stopped that, yes, you can blame that entity if it is a CEB or PUCSL. Nothing like that happened, right?
Well, it's very easy to point the finger at the government, Dr. Pereira. It has been happening over and over again.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you think CEB is responsible, yes, you can point the finger at CEB. If you think PUCSL is responsible, you can point the finger at them, right? So at the end of the day, somebody has to take the responsibility.
And you're pointing the finger at the government.
I think.
And you could do so as well.
I think in a philosophical level also, it's the government,
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandra Pereira, Deputy General Manager of the Sri Lanka Electricity Board and also past President of the Engineers Union of the Sri Lanka Electricity Board. Dr. Sandra Pereira will be appointed as the additional General Manager of the CEB in a week from now. I now move my attention to Lakmal Fernando, Secretary of the Solar Industry Association. Lakmal, renewable energy. We've been discussing about this matter over and over again on this very show over the last few months. How important is it to have renewable energy into play? Because if we had a proper plan, if we had the plan that we envisaged in 2016 about bringing in solar, making Sri Lanka a vibrant economy, all that and more, would we have faced this crisis?
I think this question will have to be answered very broadly. If you take the power crisis currently we are faced with, in 2016, the first warning has gone to the government by directive of PUCSL. 2018 and 19 power cuts are going to be inevitable. And they have given very, very direct, procedure to follow. X amount of power plants will have to come in order to curtail this. And at the same time, at that time, the same secretary who we are having right now, Mr. Batagoda, Dr. Batagoda, he had written to CEB giving certain directives. None of these things have seen the daylight. So the only way that we can come to some kind of assumptions. Now today I was talking to a few senior people in the country as far as the energy is concerned. They themselves can't understand what is the actual energy shortage what we are faced with. Now last week we signed up for 100 megawatts And this week, again, there is a story going on about another 500 megawatt. When I questioned few people, I asked them, what is our actual shortage? No one knows what is our actual shortage. So how can you establish an actual shortage without having the proper data? That is the problem. Whereas on the other hand, Solar Industries Association, we have gathered data from Sustainable Energy Authority. Over 670 applications, more than 1,500 megawatts, that is 1.5 gigawatts, had been lying in closets for nearly 3 years. Of course, there are reasons to that. They say that there is a Attorney General's opinion, but who is there to change the Attorney General's opinion? Is it me? Is it CEB? Or is it the government? I think the government has not taken aggressive enough path by looking at the shortages that was well early predicted. Solar is something that can be very easily rolled out. You can roll out a 1 megawatt solar power plant within a couple of months' time. I have seen it happening, and we have done it, and it's so easy.
No, but is the government really serious about solar energy? Because we had the Surya Bala Sangramya under President Maithripala Sirisena in 2016. We spoke about solar energy. We spoke about giving loans. We spoke about buying back solar energy from households. We spoke so big about things. But is the government really serious about solar energy?
They have been serious, and they will be serious, and they are. But the thing is, there are different ways of treating different industries. Now, recently, Honorable Minister has put in a cabinet paper that says wind and solar both are going to be given a same feed-in tariff, which is about 16 rupees. I'm very confident that wind industry will thrive with this new tariff, proposed tariff. But for solar, that's not going to be the case, because if you take basically the power plant factor in solar is as half as wind plants. So whereas the implementation is concerned, it's about 20 to 25% more expensive.
So you mean to say, Lakmal, I'm trying to figure out this. So you're trying to say that the present government does not know or are not aware what our shortage is, and they're trying to shoot in the dark at present, saying we will complete everything by the 10th of April, and guess what? There won't be any power cuts. Is that what you're trying to say?
10th of April is a very sweet target, because most of the factories that we are having here today are going to be closing on the 9th. So obviously the power demand will go down drastically. So I don't think until the time the 22nd officially the factories opens, the demand that we are faced with today is going to be there.
Yeah, factories will close down only on the 12th of this month.
10th.
My factory,
I have
that I'm
spoken to
working,
you.
is closing down.
Okay, let's say the 10th.
So let's say the 12th.
Yeah.
Let's say the 12th.
So for about 10 days, we are not going to be having a big problem, because the consumption will go down drastically. But as a whole, we don't have a policy for renewable energy development. I'll tell you with examples.
No, but my question is not that, Lakmal. You said that the government is not even aware with regard to the shortage of power that we have at present.
I cannot categorically say that it's the government, because the people have spoken, of course, they represent government. But I don't know who has taken the decision.
Right. So you will say that they don't even know what the shortage is, but they're saying that, guess what? On the 10th of April,
for example, 2
going
weeks
to be
ago, when we spoke about this, they said it's about 175 to 200 megawatts. And today it's 500. Is it going to be 1,000 next week?
Okay. Thank you very much, Lakmal Fernando. Secretary of the Solar Industry Association of Sri Lanka. I'm still trying to figure out after the 10th of April, I thought there won't be any power cuts in the nights, but it seems like that's a far-fetched dream at present. I now move my attention to Dr. Vidura Ralapanava, energy sector specialist. Vidura, most of the individuals are pointing their fingers now at environmentalists. You were also one time an environmentalist, energy expert, cum environment. You were also one of the staunch supporters of stopping the Sampur coal power plant at that time. I recollect when this was announced in the 23rd of September 2016, you came on this very show and said that our prayers have been answered. We've done something remarkable to turn this country around. It's going to be a coal-free country now, and you were very optimistic about it on the 26th of September 2016, to give you the date precisely. However, now, those very people who said kudos to you then are now pointing the finger at individuals like you as well, saying, if we had the Sampur coal power plant operating, we wouldn't have faced this crisis at present.
Sure.
And you are to be blamed also. Your time starts now.
Sure. So the assumption there is that the Sampur power plant would have been up by now, and that assumption leaves quite a lot to the imagination. I'll just take two simple points to this. There was a court case pending which was not resolved, but there's a more interesting one. None of the tenders were issued for the power plant. Now, last time CEB issued a tender, that was for the 300 megawatt Kerawalapitia power plant, which was issued in 2016, and we still haven't been able to award one. So CEB's ability to award a tender is also questionable. There was no cost allocated for this power plant, because when we met Mr. Andra Vijaypal, who was chairman, at this show itself, when we asked how much does the Sampur power plant cost, he said, well, until we give the tenders, we don't know. So there was no financial agreement. But I'll tell you something very interesting. There was no coal unloading jetty for the Sampur power plant planned, right? So we were going to build a power plant in Sampur without a coal unloading jetty. There was no feasibility plan. There was no environmental impact assessment of a coal unloading jetty. There's a very nice story behind it. I think if we have some time, I'll get into this.
I can give you 1.5 minutes.
No, but I want to come back to the bigger question that you're asking. The problem of power cuts. So what is happening now? From 2016 onwards, we have been pushing back power cuts by buying emergency power, which is outside the generation plan. We bought it in 2016, we bought it in 2017, we bought it in 2018, in whatever form. We call it emergency power, we call it supplementary power. Why is that? Was this also because Sampur was not built in 2016, in 2017, in 2018? What happened this year? The minister himself went to the cabinet, got approval in January saying that we have power crisis, we need emergency power. Then later on decided we are not going to buy emergency power. And now, 2 months after, we are buying emergency power, right? The other point that I wanted to make is that I have a list of 3,061 megawatts of power plants that was supposed to come up within this period. And I'll give you one. Lakmal spoke about 1,480 megawatts of distributed solar. There was a distributed solar tenders for 74 megawatts. Small hydro, 150 megawatts. Small hydro renewals of expired PPAs, 150 megawatts. Biomass, 100 megawatts. Biomass, 80 megawatts. Medium scale solar, 220 megawatts. Solar with storage, 5 megawatts. Wind, 270. LNG, 300. HFO, 200. Large hydro, 182. These were all supposed to come between 2019 and 2020. 3,061 megawatts, out of which how much has been built? Nothing. So we are talking about how CEB is going to build a coal power plant and all the problems go away when they can't build a HFO plant, they can't build a wind power plant, solar plant. Nothing. None of this has been tendered. So what are we talking about?
But, sorry, Vidura. Vidura, right now, if we did not have the Narochole coal power plant, we would have been in an utter mess. Would you agree?
So let's talk about Narochole coal power plant, right?
No, my question is very simple. If we did not have the Narochole coal power plant, we would have been in a mess.
When Narochole was built, there was not many options at the table. Sampur was not the case. USA has not built a single power plant, coal power plant from 2014. India is not building a single coal power plant for the next 10 years. Japan has just decided that they will not build or extend any coal power plants. Germany has planned on 2038 sunset date where all the coal power plants will be closed.
So what were we doing since 2016, September 23rd?
That is the question. This is what I'm trying to tell you. 3,061 megawatts of power plants. In the plants, it was blocked. All the NCRE projects were blocked. You can ask who blocked it.
Who blocked it?
CEB. Very simple. NCRE is the scheme that all these small hydropower plants was built.
I need to stop you at that. I need to
Sure.
get to Dr. Pereira. Dr. Pereira, a very serious allegation against the CEB. Dr. Vidura is saying that you all were instrumental in stopping all those innovative ideas that were brought to the table, and your organization is responsible.
I think from what the gentleman on my left said, he said all these proposals were lying at Sustainable Energy Authority, not with CEB.
That's wrong.
Right. What is wrong?
I was informed by Sustainable Energy Authority Director General. All these grid connection applications have been sent to CEB long time ago. He confirmed it to me.
Now,
No, but let's speak about the allegation that Vidura just leveled against the CEB.
So can I be specific on this?
Yeah.
Small hydro 150 megawatts, biomass 80 megawatts. These were both stopped, as well as the solar. Because if you look at the
we need to.
okay, let me explain now.
Let Dr. Pereira answer.
When a proposal comes to the Sustainable Energy Authority, yes, they refer it to the CEB.
Right.
Now, CEB has to investigate, among other things, the technical feasibility, whether it is capable of connecting to the grid, so many other things. So that investigation itself.
So I've been investigating for the last 3 years. Wow.
No,
that's a lot of time.
what do you mean?
So
we have allowed some of the plants.
No, so
it's not that we have rejected 100%. Already there are about 550 NCRE in the system.
Shami,
But the problem is they are not firm capacity, right? Now you are talking about a 1000 megawatt or 100 megawatt solar plant, right? The peak demand at this time of the day would be something like, if we didn't have power cuts, would be something like 2000, I believe it's over 2300, 2600
No, but
at the moment.
is very simple.
Now, how much of that 2600 megawatts can we get from solar now?
I mean, let me be very clear on
Very
this.
quickly, with
Not a single NCRE application has been approved from 2016 February.
No.
Not a single one. This
No.
is not. This is no. Let me clear this, right? Because the current.
You are saying this with responsibility, right?
Yeah, I'm saying this with responsibility. There are letters. There are letters given by AGM energy purchasers saying that we will not entertain any NCRE claiming an issue with the statute.
Vidra, I need to speak to
Sure.
before.
From
giving the
2016
opportunity for
onwards, when Mr.
journalists to
Karivasan
pose
took
questions, I need to
the
finish the
position.
first round with Dr. Pereira's comments, because
No, he mentioned that there was a decision by the Attorney General that prevents CB from doing certain things, right? Now, we are not under, and Attorney General is not under our control. When the Attorney General, he's the lawyer for the government. So when the Attorney General gives an opinion, we have to follow that. Of course, UCSL here might take a different view, right? But the moment that we start ignoring the opinion given by the Attorney General, unless it's overruled by a court of law, then the whole system breaks down.
No, but the Attorney General's department is not involved with regard to the
It is.
NCRC.
That is what he said.
No, Vidura is saying something completely
So
different.
let me come back. No, I will again be clear, right?
No, Vidura, you don't have to be saying the same thing over and over again.
No, I'm not saying the same thing over again.
So if CB cannot accommodate whatever the proposals, either for technical reasons or legal issues.
So for 3
It will
years,
not.
for 3 years,
Whether 3
nothing
years
was
or
done.
5 years, if we cannot do that, we cannot. If it is not allowed,
I need
we
to
cannot.
respond to this.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your
Now,
thoughts.
I asked you a simple question, right? He's talking about 100 megawatts or whatever amount of solar. Supposing we had that plant today, right? What help would that be to support the peak demand at this time, night peak?
Excuse me.
We'll open the floor for questions. We'll open the floor for questions.
Yeah.
Let me quickly introduce our journalist, and then let's start the discussion. On to my immediate left is.
No, you can talk all you want about
Yeah, we will speak to
renewable
in a bit.
energy.
Just give me 20 seconds, Dr. Pereira, if you don't mind, please. On to my immediate left is Nadim Majid. On to my far left is Shahan, and right on the middle is Deshan Gonawala. So let's start off the discussion with the journalist, also engaging with the panelists. So let's start off with Nadim.
Dr. Pereira, do you think that the CEB has a tough time comprehending, or at least the CEB management has a tough time comprehending what the role of a regulator is? Can you imagine what would happen in the stock exchange, for example, if the CSE management were to decide that they were not going to listen to the Securities and Exchange Commission anymore?
I don't think,
can it function in that way?
I don't think that's even a question, because CEB supported at the initial stages, because we supported an entity which would regulate us at the end of the day, right? Now, the idea, that is what I was trying to explain earlier also, the idea was that the regulator has to be independent. Now, the question arises how independent the present regulator is.
Why is there a question regarding the
Yes,
independence
that's
of the
the question. Let me explain. Now, for one thing, the regulator's role was, because regulator, we supported the regulator because we thought regulator will take the government role onto him, onto the regulator, and then would be an independent regulator, because everybody thought that government interference was something that would retard the progress of this sector, right? At least that was the idea, and in that sense, the regulator had to be, by definition, an independent entity. That is why in the legislation, the regulator, the PUCSL is appointed by the Constitutional Council, not by the minister. Earlier, it was the minister. We had a single person who would regulate, electrical inspector, of course, appointed by the minister in charge.
So right now, by that logic, the PUCSL currently should be far more independent than it used to be.
Now, the regulator should be independent and also should be seen as independent. Now, the second part is really missing, because you find the regulator coming and expressing its own opinion.
But Dr. Pereira, it sounds to me like you're questioning the independence of the regulator simply because the regulator doesn't agree with the position of the CEB.
Absolutely
or
not.
More specifically, the CEB Engineers Union.
Absolutely not, because I'll give you an example. Okay, now I think this dispute, or whatever you choose to call it, started with this the approval process of the generation expansion plan in 2018, right? Okay, you can argue on both sides. There were issues and so on. End of the day, it ended up going to the Attorney General for an opinion, right? Now, the Attorney General, of course, has given a very clear opinion, saying that what the PUCSL has done is not according to the Electricity Act, but the PUCSL doesn't accept that. That's their problem. But I have the opinion.
An Attorney General's opinion is not binding. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the courts that must make a decision.
Yes. So this is the problem. Now, if the regulator is considered.
Dr. Pereira, I'll come back to you in a second. Kanchana, I'd like to pose this question to you. We saw some interesting comments coming from political authorities recently regarding the court case that has been filed by the Public Utilities Commission. I actually want to get a clear answer from you on this, because as Dr. Pereira said, not only must the Public Utilities Commission be independent, it must also appear to be, must be seen to be independent as well. Do you feel that some of the comments that we've heard in the recent past from politicians, including and not limited to the President, are actions of political overreach into the independence of the Public Utilities Commission?
Now, you have to understand these legislations are passed by the Parliament. That is the supreme representation of the people. So they have done it through their constitutional powers. So then I think this is part of the executive, the President or the ministers or the others complaining is not happy with that legislative authority we are exercising through those acts. So, I mean, for us, there are a lot of provisions in these acts we can implement, but we have been very careful in showing those, implementing those provisions. So this is one of the incidences we have acted according to the act, to ensure that the public is protected from the vertically integrated monopoly that is in the sector. So that is to ensure transparency, accountability, and proper functioning of the sector. So that is our view in that.
But now we are in that endeavor. We found ourselves in a crisis situation where for 4 hours of the day in rotations and in various cycles. Much of the country, with the exception of certain areas in Colombo, is in darkness, unable to function. This has had a severe impact, especially on the self-employed, people who work from home, who are unable to get their work done. I work as a consultant. Most of my work is done from home as well. 3 hours during the daytime is killer on my work. So my question is, how did we arrive at this thing? Why is it that we have, for example, again, going back to my question of regulator and body being regulated, if this was the Stock Exchange and the Securities Exchange Commission, and the Securities Exchange Commission issued a directive to the Stock Exchange, that directive would be followed, or there would be very serious consequences. What I cannot comprehend is how the CEB is able to continually disregard directives from the Public Utilities Commission and not have any consequences whatsoever. That's beyond me. I can't comprehend it. Can you comprehend it?
I see it as a structural issue. Now, we have a vertically integrated monopoly, and it's an essential service. And so that essential service is, say, 80-90% is controlled by one entity, and it's publicly owned. So in that sense, we would have loved if the 2004 the Electric Reforms Act was there, so that we'll have 5-6 entities representing CEB in the sector, so that we will have a bit more transparency, a bit more competition, a bit more accountability, so that we are in a better position to control this kind of situation from not happening. So here, what we find is, of course, we can take legal action, but what use if CEB doesn't follow it? Because we can't shut down CEB.
One more question, Deshan. Mr. Fernando, as sort of a private sector renewable energy, or as the representative of the solar, specifically industry association, I want to ask you this question. Do you see the PUCSL as an independent commission?
In my opinion, they are the watchdog.
Are they independent? Are they an independent watchdog?
Our association with them is all the data, whatever that we need, we obtain from them. And the entire industry is handicapped. As I told you earlier, we don't know what is our energy shortage even, because of this non-compliance issue between CEB and PUCSL. I believe PUCSL is doing a good job, and they are trying to safeguard the poor person in this country, the interest of the poorest in this country. That's my personal opinion.
Can I just respond?
Dr. Pereira, yes, I was about to come
very
to you
briefly.
first.
I'll just give an example. You make your own judgment whether PUCSL is independent or not. Right? Because I started by saying that the PUCSL primary expectation of the people as well as the CEB was that it would take the government's role of interference away from the government and be an independent regulator. Now I'll give you an example. Now we talk so much about this 300 megawatt LNG plant, right? How this plant came into the picture. Now PUCSL writes to the general manager of CEB on 18 November 2016, letter titled Additional 300 megawatt LNG power plant in Keralapitia. I'll just give an extract. Additional 300 megawatt LNG combined cycle power plant in Keralapitia. Reference extract of minutes PMC such and such dated October 31st, 2016 of the Cabinet Committee on Economic Management held on October 26 attached. In the CCEM, that is the Cabinet Committee, held on October 26, 2016, it was decided to implement an additional 300 megawatt LNG power plant in Keralapitia to cater to the additional prospective demands caused by megapolis development port city. Now, they are, to start with, the CCM was not a legal entity. I think the president himself said that, and I think cancelled that, right?
Well, it's a
Irrespective of
subcommittee
that,
of cabinet, so whether,
No,
regardless of the president's opinion on it is.
You show me
The
where
Cabinet
in the
Committee on Economic
PUCL Act or in the Electricity Act it says that they had to take directions from the CCM or the cabinet. Then I will rest my case.
Okay. But
Nadim-
none of what you said really brought into question the independence of the Public Utilities Commission.
Why not? You know, they are taking directions from entity that.
But it's the government's duty to set policy.
No, the act.
So you're saying it's the CEB's duty to set policy.
I'm not saying they should not take directives from the government, but there's a specific, way in which the directives are given, which is very, very
Dr. Pereira,
clearly articulated in the.
You're questioning the Sorry, I'll let Deshan and Shehan get in a few questions before. I have a lot more questions, but
Nadim, can I?
Thank you, Nadim.
part
Dr. Ralpanam, I'm coming to you. Now,
Sure.
there's a great deal of discourse that has happened so far tonight. But what I want to know is, there were a few key points that I was paying attention to. One is that it was mentioned that there's a structural problem. Next thing there was the independence of the PUCSL called into question. Now, for me, as a journalist, it sounds like people are passing the buck.
Sure.
Do you not think that this has been what has happened for the longest time, and in the face of a crisis, this is what is continuing to happen, and that in itself is the very problem?
So let me answer this question to you, right? The role of the PUCSL is to regulate, right? Now, the question we can ask, so I do not agree that the characterization that was made that this is a dispute between two parties. If you extend the same situation, bribery commission taking action against a minister is a dispute between two parties. So should we say bribery commission should not act on any government official or minister? So this is ridiculous. So it goes back to the similar point that that Nadim made. If I listen to the conversation that is happening now, it seems like CB is the perfect law-abiding organization, always listens to Attorney General's views and sticks to them, and PUCSL doesn't, other people don't. So let me give you this equation. So the argument here is that we have not continued with NCRE projects because there's Attorney General's opinion. It's not binding, but there's Attorney General's opinion. There was a project that was awarded, ACE and Bilipitiya project, which was not tendered, which was not an emergency power project because Cabinet did not declare emergency. It is an illegal purchase. Who said it? Dr. Batagoda, when CB refused to pay them their money. He said, this is not a legal purchase, however, because of an urgency, we have to pay. So that's an illegal act according to the act. Now, again, there was a question. There were two power projects, waste to energy, that was given. This did not come out of a tender, which is the process that CEB is saying the reason we are not giving NCRE tariffs is because it's not coming out of a tender. So when we want to give to ACE and Bilipitiya, we don't mind not having a tender. When we want to give the project to waste to energy, we don't mind the tender. So it's selective. It's a selective use of legal provisions. The same way, it appears to me that in numerous occasions where it is beneficial, whether they want to act according to the law or above the law changes. I'll give you 3 more examples. This week, last week, there was a court decision which basically invalidated the salary circular that was written to benefit the engineers by the court illegally. Right? I would like to read what the judge said about it.
Yeah, can you make it quick because I want to talk to Mr. Lakmal as well.
The preliminary the decision contained in P11 is bad, incurably bad, illegal, ex facie illegal, null and void ab initio. Third one, Norachole power plant right now is running on an illegal operation. Out of the 3 power plants, the 3 units they have, 2 of them are running without the flue gas desulfurizer, which removes the sulfur dioxide gas, and the emission levels are beyond what is legally allowed. Because it's CB, we don't mind it. So this whole legality does not make sense. I want to make another issue here. So I do not like this characterization saying that this is a dispute between 2 parties. It's an artificially constructed dispute. Now, you asked a question about data, and I'll tell you about something very simple. Normally, we run out of power based on hydro unavailability on a year preceded by a drought. 2018 was not a drought year. We had so much water that at some point CB decided not to power up one of the Norachole power plants because they had to dispatch hydro. Now when we had so much water to start the year, how is it that by February we have run out of water? Why? What happened? Right? This is a question. Now why is it that nobody knows this? Because this data, I will show you this document is what CB used to file every day, right? It has a graph which is called reservoir statistics, comparative chart of different years, how the reservoir levels have behaved. Where is this chart now? Because if you had this chart, we would know what happened to the water. So why we have a power cut?
No, but Vidura, you say that there is no dispute between two parties. However,
it's very evident. It's very
evident that I don't know. I probably would want to ask this question from Kanchana. Kanchana, the brewing problem with the CEB has continued since early last January. I can give you a few examples. It started off when the CEB requested the PUSL to verify calculations with CEB and Ministry before publishing its figures. This was on the 2nd of January 2018 when they issued a statement. And then on the 4th of February 2019, PUSL lock horns over emergency power purchases with Ceylon Electricity Board. And then again, it brewed down to May. It says that CEB never agreed with PUSL amendment. And then it went on to November, September. CEB and PUSL called truce but tense over details. So this has been published right across the newspapers as well as the media with regard to the disputes that the CEB and the PUSL has been having. And ultimately, court said that the PUSL, the CEB has agreed to pay 162 million rupees to the PUSL as well. I don't know whether this materialized or not, but this happened in September 18th, 2018. So this dispute between the two parties have continued now close to over a year. Am I right, Kanchana?
I wouldn't call it a dispute really, because
what is it then?
no, this kind of relationship with the regulator is natural. If you take Indian utilities and regulators, you see how many court cases they are fighting. It's natural. We are not supposed to be, like, wife and husband. It's not like that.
They are not even asking you to be that power.
It's not a loving relationship, because there are laws, there are things to be done. The power has to be there.
But there seems to be a dispute between the two parties at present. Even now, we see you all have launched, I can just give you a simple example. One of the CEB engineers union said that the PUSL was lying about the power generation plan that they had in play, and they did not agree between the two parties about the power generation plan that was supposed to be unveiled in May last year. And as a result of that, the CEB Engineers Union called an emergency meeting on the 1st of July last year as well to discuss about the power generation plan. But all these details were not privy to the general public. So there is a problem, right? Yes or no? It's not about being the husband and the wife. And
no, it's not a problem between CEB and PUCSL. Probably there is a problem between CEB Engineers Union and PUCSL. CEB is not.
Mr. Srivadan, you commented on the relationship between the CEB and the PUCSL, but here's the bottom line. Although it may be common for there to be disagreements, we're talking about a problem that has been going on since 1979. We're talking about power cuts that were first happened in 1979, then in 1983, then in 1987, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2008, and now in 2019. We're talking about at least 3 generations, at least. So this is seriously, or this is obviously a serious issue. And you can't simply just disregard it as a more simple disagreement. I would like to raise an issue. You were talking about, Mr. Ralapana, about the nature in which this power crisis suddenly arose. there was a flashpoint, which was what happened in Norachole in March. It's interesting that all these power interruptions started right after the breakdown of the Norachole coal power plant. Why is that? Up until that point, yes, there may have been certain warnings that came along the way, but ever since that moment, there was first rumors of power interruptions, scheduled power interruptions, and the ministries kept saying, no, there will be no power cuts, that we will resolve the situation. But however, the rumors turned out to be true, and there were power cuts, and ever since we've seen these power cuts. Can you explain why it is?
I will do that. On the same day that the Norachole plant tripped and there was power cuts, there was a letter that CEB General Manager issued to Dr. Batagoda, Secretary of Power and Energy, saying that the reservoir levels are low, we have to go into power cuts. But you are right in one sense that Norachole was actually responsible for this power cut. And the reason was, see, what we have right now, because the demand has been growing, is a very tight power system, right? So any unplanned outage is going to drain hydro, right? Now, why was that? It was because of two reasons. One, because we were using too much hydro during daytime. Now, as Lakmal said, if we had a lot of solar, we would not have had to dispatch so much hydro during daytime. That would have saved our hydro. The second issue that happened was Norachole power plant, unit number 3, was shut down for a routine maintenance in December. It was supposed to shut down for 30 days, but it ran almost 2.5 months. So they could not get the plant up on time. And what happened was that 300 megawatt shortage had to be met with hydro. So we had full reservoirs, but we drained them because Norachole plant was not reliable enough, right? And then suddenly we have a power crisis, and this was, funnily enough, this was a coincidence because government would have had to go. Now what happens in a large generator like 300 megawatts shut down on a tight power system, you have to have power cuts. But it's just precipitated. But the roots of it was much larger because we did not build the power plants, nor could we run Norachole on time. Let me just clarify this again, right? Right now, Norachole plant number 1 is running 80 megawatts short. Right? This has been happening from 2015. That was the last time it ran 300. So we never fixed it. That's 80 megawatt shortage. That's 80 megawatt of avoided emergency power. Second issue is that in the generation planning process, coal power plant is assumed to be dispatching 80%. That means it's generating 80% for the during the year. From the start of this plant, it has never crossed 67%. What is the gap? That's 1,000 gigawatt hours. There is a 1,000 gigawatt hours shortage because Norachole power plant cannot run 80%.
Dr. Pereira, I think you should be given an opportunity to respond to what's being said.
Yeah, I think I'm in full agreement with one of the points he said, because we are in this situation today because we have not built the power plants at the time they were required in the capacities they are required. There is no argument on that point. Beyond that, of course, I think a lot of things are left to imagination because now you're talking about the hydro releases. Now he posed the question, okay, we had a full reservoir and then all of a sudden it was drained. Of course, he gave some reasons, some of which may be true, but one thing you have to understand is, the drain in the reservoir, the use of water in the reservoir is not entirely up to CB because they are, especially if you take the Mahavali reservoir system.
It's used for irrigation as well.
Irrigation requirements, drinking water requirements, so everything has to be.
So is what Vidura is saying true or false? Were the reservoirs drained because of the lack of capacity or the breakdowns at Norachole? Is that why they were full in January and they're empty by March? Or is it because they needed extra water for irrigation?
Of course, there is nothing to dispute about that, because if a major power plant breaks down unexpectedly, of course that demand has to be met by some other
You were saying about the Mahavali projects. Yes,
no, the Mahavali, the releases are basically controlled by the Mahavali authority because they own the reservoirs. But of course, there's an organization called Water Management Secretariat, where CEB, Water Board, everyone who is using the water will come together and agree on the releases.
But you're well aware, Dr. Pereira, that the Mahavali power plants or the power plants surrounding the Mahavali reservoirs were outside the particular plan in question.
Outside what?
Outside the particular plan in question, because it was never thought that these reservoirs are going to build the power when Government Saranaika built these reservoirs in question. It was completely for agricultural purposes at that time.
I don't know, I have not heard that. This is the first time I'm hearing that, because they were supposed to be multi-purpose reservoirs, and the power plants were built because of the Mahavali reservoirs. So I don't know who gave you the idea that they were only for irrigation.
This was in an article published in 1993.
Of course, we were also talking about exporting power to India at the time. So,
Dr. Pereira, you said very clearly that there's no disagreement whatsoever on that, and I don't think anyone can disagree. The reason for our current power crisis situation is that since, and to do also with North Soleil's lack of reliability, is that we haven't built a new power plant in the past few years. So then that logically brings us to the next question. Why haven't we built a new power plant in the last few years?
Well, that's a million-dollar question.
Whether it's renewable or coal or sustainable, why haven't we built it?
Now, CB on its own can plan and propose, and of course PUC itself can approve, but at the end of the day you need the money to build it. The government has the major responsibility of arranging the finances.
So it's because the government hasn't allocated money?
Well, the government will allocate, government will have to negotiate with some donor, and of course the money, if the government doesn't have its own money. Obviously, the power plants of this capacity, it requires a lot of...
So it hasn't been done because we can't finance it?
I wouldn't say that, but I think for reasons, of course, that are best known to the decision makers, that has not been done, because they know very well the PUCSL has got plans.
Is it because we can't finance it?
We need to go for a short commercial break. When we come back, we have to discuss more in length about the power crisis in the country. We're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Quite a heated debate indeed in the first and the second round. I now move my attention to Dr. Santa Pereira, Deputy General Manager, Ceylon Electricity Board. Dr. Pereira, CEB's least cost long-term generation plan, has that been implemented?
Well, the short answer is no.
Why?
Because I think there had been a lot of interest at various times, by a lot of people. So there has not been any concerted effort by the parties involved, especially the decision makers, be it the ministry or the government at large, to implement, whatever the projects that have been proposed and hopefully approved by the PUC itself. Right.
So a long-term power generation plan was given to the PUSL.
Yes.
That is for 2015 to 2034.
It's basically for a 20-year period.
Yeah.
It's a rolling plan.
That's
it's updated every 2 years.
So this particular plan was not approved by the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka.
I wouldn't say it was not approved. It was replaced by a plan of its own. This is where I think the disagreement started on this particular issue.
At what cost, Dr. Pereira? See, two organizations are having an argument about Sri Lanka's future. At what cost? I'll make it very simple, Dr. Pereira. So I'll make it very simple. When you go home, you're not working in the Ceylon Electricity Board anymore. You are supposed to think about the home front.
Okay.
If you had a daughter or a son studying for the exams and there was no power at home, who would you blame? Who would you take the phone and start blaming? Is it who? Is it yourself or someone else?
I think before I answer that question, I had to tell you that you are making the basic assumption that the present crisis is because of this so-called dispute. It is not, right? Yes, there was a disagreement between CEB and PUCSL on the 2018 Generation Expansion Plan, but that has nothing to do with the present crisis. Okay, it may lead to some problems in the future, but we still have time to resolve that issue. So if you go on the assumption that what we are facing today is because of this dispute, you are wrong, right? And
What we're facing today is because of the government.
sorry?
What we're facing today is because of the government. Is that what you're trying to say?
What we face today is because we have failed consistently to implement large-scale power plants which were proposed and agreed.
So when the court decided that the Sampur coal power plant should not go ahead on the 23rd of September 2016, what was the alternative that the CEB had in mind?
Well, this decision was taken all of a sudden, so CEB was...
And there was a court case which was going on.
Where?
And the Sampur coal power plant, the first agreement was signed in 2006, Dr. Pereira, and not in 2016. If it happened overnight, then we could agree with you saying fine.
The decision to stop the plant was not because of the outcome of a court case. Yes, there would have been more than one court case, but the decision was not based on the court case. We have to be very clear on that. Right? The court would have ruled against it or for it. It's a different issue. There's no ruling so far. But the decision was a government decision. I don't know who in the government made that, because depending on whom you talk to, people will say it was the president, some people might say it was the prime minister. But end of the day, it was stopped. That's a fact.
So let's take a look in a private sector scenario, in an organization in the private sector. If the organization is told not to do something, or you need to have an alternative way to move forward, the companies in question will have to adopt and adhere and then move forward. My question to you is very simple. What did the CEB do after this came about in 2016? What have you all done since 2016, September 23rd, when the decision was taken to stop or halt the operations with regard to the Sampur coal power plant?
Okay, now for example, the 300 megawatt LNG plant at the end of the day came out of the CEB plan. Okay, maybe it was, like I explained earlier, it was because of the CCM decision, but it was eventually included in the expansion plan, and it was tendered, it was evaluated, it went to the cabinet, and of course got held up. Of course, I think reasons are well known. Subsequently there's a court case, but before the court case there were other issues.
So are you trying to say, Dr. Pereira, now this is very alarming, are you trying to say that there is no plan at present to avert this crisis?
There is a plan.
What's the plan?
The Generation Expansion Plan is the plan.
Yeah, but
right.
So you're saying that there is no plan that is implemented or yet to be implemented, but there is a plan in someone's head saying this is going to happen.
No, it's not in someone's head. Okay. How can you say that? These documents are available to the public, and there is a plan on paper. So everybody can see that,
Dr. Pereira,
people can criticize it,
I myself as an individual can't go and implement a plan that the CEB or the PUSL or the government has implemented. It's up to the CEB, the PUSL as well as the government to implement that proposal.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
You're saying that a plan is there,
yes,
but the plan is not being implemented.
This is exactly what I'm saying.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Dr. Sri Pereira, Deputy General Manager of the Sri Lanka Electricity Board. I now move my attention to Kanchana Siriwardana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Kanchana, interestingly, the CEB says that they have given you all the plan between 2015 up until 2034. Why didn't you all agree?
Actually, we have approved that plan. I must tell you.
Dr. Pereira said that you all have not approved the plan, so hence it cannot go ahead.
I think there's a mistake. There's one plan, 2015, 2034, and 2018, 2037 is another plan.
Okay, so which plan has been implemented by you all now, or at least taken into consideration?
Now, we have approved both with some amendments. Now, the 2015 plan came to us in August 2015. As per our guidelines, it should have come in 2014 April 30. So this came, 12, 16 months late. But then we have asked for some amendments and clarifications. And so that, of course, came to us in August. Sorry, sometime later, about 8 months later, in 2016. So, yes, December. So, so we have taken 2-3 months to approve it after the revised version came to us. So, going through public consultations, our own studies, so that was done.
So a plan is there now.
Yeah, 2015-34 was approved, but of course we know that Sampur was cancelled by the government policy decision. So then after that we can't approve the plan because it was due in 2021 in that.
So then there was another plan that was submitted between 2018
in 2018, yes.
37.
Yes.
So why is this plan not implemented? However, 29.
No, there's a plan now. We approved the amended version because of the economic, we have to approve the least economic cost plan.
So what is the least economic cost effective way?
So it depends.
Of electricity?
Now, what we approved was basically a collection of renewables and natural gas fired power plants. And of course, there was a government decision later on, government policy directive, saying that it has to be 1/3 natural gas, 1/3 coal, and 1/3 oil or something like that. Similar to that, I'm not exactly telling that. So based on that, of course, they are supposed to come up with a new revised plan next year.
The government policy is 1/3 LNG, 1/3 coal, and 1/3 renewables.
Yes, yes.
That's the government policy.
Firm power.
Right, thank you. I now move attention to Dr. Vidura Panava, energy sector specialist. Vidura, interestingly, 1/3 LNG, 1/3 coal, and 1/3 renewables. Now, quite interestingly, this is not what was agreed upon by President Maithripala Sirisena at COP21 when he went to Copenhagen. There was a clear commitment from the then Minister of Environment, now the President of Sri Lanka, about cutting down its greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that we move towards a much more renewable energy, to source renewable energy. So where do we stand at present? This is why I even pose this question to Lakmal. Are we serious about this? Is there government commitment to move towards renewable energy?
Sure. So what the president did was that, for us also this came as a surprise, because the president suddenly flew to India, sat with Prime Minister Modi and said, look, we don't want your coal power plant, build a natural gas power plant. He went to Japan and said the same thing, right, and said we don't want any more coal in this country, we will only go for natural gas.
Yeah.
So the first thing after that, when India and Japan came up with the natural gas power plants and they were starting to discuss with CEB, but the CEB Electrical Engineers Union, first thing they did was saying that if you don't give us our coal power plant, we will not sit in any technical evaluation committees regarding natural gas. So you want to find out who blocked, you can find out who blocked. Now, I think one of the most interesting and fascinating facts about this government is that they have a policy of not letting any good thing unreversed. So they do some good thing and they want to go and reverse it, saying, why did I do such a good thing? So this was why the president's change of heart with respect to coal came into being. Now, I can tell you that there is a generation plan being worked out by CEB now, which has 3 coal power plants. Now, the simplest thing I can tell you about this is that none of the 3 is implementable. Why? Because 2 of these power plants are supposed to be built on the same Norochole site. Now, if we think that this will cover the environmental problems and the social problems of people in Norochole in an election year, we are mistaken. And we want to go back to Sampur. So these plans you can make. The problem we don't understand is that just because CEB puts it in a generation plan and gets somebody to approve it, that they can build it. Because when you take a power plant like coal, where there's serious environmental and social issues, local people as well as other people have to have their say in it. This has happened in all over the world, right? Now there is a power plant. This is one of the most famous power plants in Germany because this is the only coal power plant that is currently being built. This got delayed by 15 years, right? And now it is supposed to be, it was originally supposed to be connected to the grid in 2011. Now they are talking about 2020. And guess what? Last month Germany said we are going to take off all coal by 2038. So even if they connect this, it will only run for 18 years, whereas a typical coal plant will run for 40 years. And last month, again, the energy minister in Germany said we should never connect this power plant. In technical term, this is called stranded assets.
But Vidura, we need to...
So what we are talking about
the
is...
The question is, Vidura, we need to compare apples with apples. We can't compare Sri Lanka with Germany, can we?
So why don't we ask about India? No more coal power plants in 10 years. Tell me which country at this point of time is building a coal power plant to run on imported coal. Imported coal. Because it's not economically viable. Look at India, okay? Mundra, there's a location called Mundra. CB people know this because they go there all the time for training. 4 gigawatts, Tata. 4 gigawatts, Adani. What happened? Closed. Why? Because imported coal became expensive. Local coal, you can run it. Renewable energy, even more cheaper. Why is Australia not building any more coal plants? They are retiring their coal power plants. They have coal inside the country. Renewable energy is more cheaper. What is Florida doing? They are closing natural gas plants and building solar and battery backup. If I will give you a good comparison, right? By 2022, listen to this, by 2022, India's energy mix will have 22% solar and wind. Sri Lanka will hit that number only in 2038. By 2038, Sri Lanka will have 53% coal, but the global number is 29. So when the whole world exits from coal, we are still building coal. By 2038, Germany will have 0 coal, 0 nuclear.
What is the alternative?
Alternative is renewable energy with adequate storage and control systems, because we have the 3 best systems. Look at this way. When we don't have hydro, we have solar. Our 3 renewable energy sources, hydro, wind and solar, work in complementary way, which many other countries in the world don't. We just need to figure out at what combinations and what supporting technology we can build a renewable energy. Now, we are not asking you to build a renewable energy grid by 2025. But where is the plan? Our plans are 2050 maybe. But from all the way up to 2038, we want to build coal power plant. This is not reasonable. Germany has 45% renewable energy now. By 2038, they will have 85%. We will never go to that level. Why are we always behind this?
Dr. Vidura Rapanava, Energy Sector Specialist. I now move my attention to Lakmal Fernando, Secretary of the Solar Industry Association. Lakmal, isn't it a pity that Sri Lanka does not have a plan in place? Vidura articulates that it's important to have the right mix. We can move away from coal, we can have hydro, we can have renewables coming into play. We have to have the proper mix. Again, Vidura was stressing on the fact that technologically we are far behind. Isn't it a pity that Sri Lanka is in this mess at present? We don't have a proper plan, there is no implementation, and we are now in the dark. Literally, we're in the dark.
Yes, I fully agree with you. It's a very sad situation that we are faced with here. Now, when the entire world is moving towards renewables, I think we are far lagging behind in decision making and probably giving wrong decisions to promote this industry. What one should understand is, as a statesman, whatever that you invest in renewable energy will remain in this country as long as people in this country does it. Now we have, as I told you earlier, we have about 1,500 megawatts of solar power projects pending. These are all small and medium scale projects, starting from as small as 0.36 megawatts, that is 360 kilowatts, and as large as 5 megawatts. They are all applied by local entrepreneurs, medium and small scale entrepreneurs. So if they are given this opportunity to develop these projects, not a penny will move out of the country from the beginning of the project. From the connection of the project, every penny that you generate will stay in this country. And you will not need any raw material as such, unlike LNG, unlike coal, unlike diesel, you will not need raw material. So this basis will have to be very clearly understood. I think people are very ignorant in this manner, and also the people in the country should realize this. The way forward is wind and solar as a complementary energy source. I'm not saying that this can be 100% renewable energy, but we
wind
all
needs a lot of space, right, Lakmal?
right now we are under 2%. So recently there was a discussion with an energy expert in the world. He has said that up to 20 to 25% renewable energy, wind and solar, can be absorbed by the grid. So we are yet at under 2%. If you see the CEB recent document, solar is not even in this because it's so small. This is their own website details.
So what do you suggest the government to do? How can the government intervene?
They should be encouraging rather than discouraging. Personally, I think right now the government is discouraging solar.
Why?
Because very inappropriate argument they are bringing in. They are saying the cost of a kilowatt hour that is sold to the general public is averaged at 16 plus rupees. Therefore, renewable energy must be sold to the CEB less than this number. Whereas they are buying diesel, they are buying all the other kind of sources, emergency power, everything at a much higher price than what they are buying, what they are proposing to buy renewable energy. So this is completely unethical behavior, in my opinion. Why do you want to discourage renewable energy? If they are saying that every energy must be sold to CEB under 16 rupees, yes, we agree. But here they buy all kinds of power sources for all kinds of prices, starting from as high as 35 to say 22, 21, and they want renewable energy to be supplied to the CEB at a lesser cost than their sale cost.
Thank you very much, Lakmal Fernando, Secretary of the Solar Industry Association. I open the floor for questions from our journalists, but a very quick question to Dr. Susantha Pereira. Doctor, Lakmal has some sense there. He says that 16 rupees per unit, and the CB goes and buys up to 35 rupees per unit. And we know that emergency power is being purchased at 30 rupees at present, and you all just extended the contract with the two private companies to provide 75 megawatts to the national grid, and that stands at 28 rupees. How ethical is that? Fair question, right?
Yeah, that's a very simplistic argument, I must say, because the premise of that argument is that you are comparing unit of solar with a unit of emergency power. They are not the same, because emergency power, it serves a different purpose, right?
No, but you just extended a contract for 75 megawatts at 28 rupees.
Yes.
Is that also emergency power?
Yes, that is because...
You all only have 100 megawatts as emergency power.
Yes.
So
of course,
why is this 75?
100 megawatts was only for, I believe it was 6 months. And the other two plants were extended for 2 years.
So buying at 28 rupees per unit. And whereas solar could be bought at 16 rupees per unit.
So I don't know what price they're asking for solar.
He just said 16 rupees.
Let me just correct it. What he's saying, I don't agree with what he's saying. This is CEB own publication.
Okay.
CEB thermal averaged at 27 rupees and 69 cents, and IPP thermal 31 rupees and 9 cents. So it is not only emergency power I'm talking about general power purchasing by the CEB. And of course, if the government wants to give energy to the general public at a lesser cost than what they are purchasing, it's a political decision. So CEB cannot be penalized for that decision.
Again, it goes back to my original argument, because you are comparing 1 unit of solar with 1 unit of thermal, major thermal or emergency thermal, which you cannot do. Right?
So,
that's
Dr. Pereira, are you trying to say that right now my electricity bill will not increase by the year 2020 because of the ill thinking of the CEB or even the government, as you say? It's going to remain static? My electricity bill at home. I'm worried about my electricity bill at home at present.
Can you repeat that question, please?
My electricity bill at home will not increase by the year 2020 because of the ill thinking of the government or even the CEB or the PUSL. Are you trying to say that it will not increase?
Oh no, CB has always been fighting for a cost
going to increase,
reflective
yes.
tariff. It's just that, government will not agree to that.
Will it increase, yes or no? After these elections are over and everything becomes back to normal, will the CEB propose a tariff revision?
Now, CEB will not propose an increase or decrease. CEB will, because there is a methodology approved by PUCSL, where CEB will have to provide the information,
my question is
and based
simple.
on which the PUCSL will decide the tariff. Correct me if I am wrong. That is the process that we follow.
Will my electricity bill increase by 2020?
I can't answer that question because that's a hypothetical question, right?
So given the current scenario, you can't even predict that it's going to...
I mean, if the government says that we will not increase the price of electricity at any cost, I mean, you have the answer there.
Dr. Pereira, I'm trying to figure out. The CEB can't predict whether the tariffs are going to increase in the future. How is it going to predict about the power
CEB can predict what the tariff is going to be because there is an approved methodology by which the tariff is formulated that I think we have followed for like 1 or 2 years, but after that the government will step in and say, like what they are saying now, we will not increase the tariff because...
Let the CEB go at a loss.
It is,
Right, okay.
I mean,
I open the floor for questions
50 billion and we are growing.
Right.
If further to all that you just said, I'd like to read a little excerpt from an editorial that was written in a leading Sunday newspaper, and it goes like this. It says, the fundamental issue appears to be the prevalence of various mafias pushing different power generation agendas for financial benefits. Thus, there is a coal mafia, the LNG mafia, the mini hydro mafia, the independent power producer mafia, the one-time wind mafia, the solar power mafia, etc., etc., etc. So the ugly word mafia is coming up quite a lot nowadays. Do you agree that there is such a mafia?
I think this is a very, very popular word. I think, something that you can easily sell to the public because they will more or less, forget the real
public
issue.
Themselves are saying there's a mafia.
Yeah, you're asking whether there are groups interested in various technologies. Yes, of course. I mean, for example, he's pushing renewable energy, but I don't think he's part of mafia. And he's, of course, pushing solar. So I don't characterize him as a member of a mafia group.
The most ineffective mafia I've seen.
Yes. But of course, there are, for various reasons, for ideological reasons or otherwise, there are different groups, promoting different kinds of technology. I mean, like we agreed here, CEB may not always agree with, some of these groups. Of course, then they are very unhappy. And at the same time, CEB also will have its own, views on what the long-term generation expansion plan should be. And of course, again, there's a process of,
Mr. Pereira, after all, these are institutions that have been brought together for the benefit of the nation.
Absolutely.
Now, if the mechanism was working correctly, then there shouldn't be a power crisis. All the pieces should be fitting together where the people would have an uninterrupted supply of power. But here, currently, there are some parties who are offering a cheaper alternative, and yet other parties are rejecting that offer. Why? Who is benefiting? Is it the people or is it individuals in those organizations, such as the engineering mafia?
If you didn't list engineering mafia in your earlier
that has been mentioned,
right? So now there's another mafia.
Thirdly, on right on the top, Dr. Pereira.
That's frequently mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, when you pose the question like, okay, there are other parties who are willing to sell power at a cheaper price. Yes, if they are willing to sell power at a cheaper price, yes, we should accommodate them, right? But according to him, he is not willing to sell price.
Yeah,
right.
We are.
I mean,
compared to the prices that people are buying right now, they are much cheaper.
Provided, of course, there are other technical factors. There may be certain investments. Now, for example, now there are some. I'm aware of some solar projects that have been proposed, and CEB is looking at those seriously. But of course, the moment you go above 50 megawatts or something, you have to construct a line. This is going to be at high voltage. So those or require additional investment. So we are certainly looking at those things. Of course, not as fast as some
We
of
don't
these
need to go
people.
there.
Mr. Fernando, you said that there's about 1,500 megawatts of solar
That's
pending approval. Vidura, that was in that mix that you were also talking about of
So-
delayed or stalled projects. Minus the solar, how much is left in mini hydro, LNG? What were the other sources? Wind.
So that's 3,000. Out of that, 1,480 that
1,500 is
So
small
about,
time.
about half of
projects.
it is solar.
Yeah, but also that's small scale solar. There's medium scale solar. Now earlier, Dr. Pereira was saying that government doesn't have money, but these are supposed to be tendered projects. So it's not government money.
These are what people are building and then
You tender it and private investors will come and build
private
it.
investors.
So it's nothing to
bid
do
for
with
it.
money.
No, in fact, all the
with
power
the
plants in
Small
the...
and medium entrepreneurs
Let me correct.
something
Let me
that-
correct you.
This
I didn't
3,000
say the government didn't have money for solar project. I didn't say the government didn't have.
No,
I
so-
did say the government didn't have money for large power plants,
So let me say
like the
this.
300 megawatt coal plant. Now,
So-
300 megawatt LNG is a private sector project at the end.
Hold on, just very quickly. Now, Vidura was mentioning about how in Sri Lanka's case, when it comes to wind, solar, and hydro, that the three are complementary to each other. When you look at how our seasons work, how our rainy seasons and dry seasons work, that is complementary. Do you agree that that is the case?
Well, I would agree to the extent that it is his opinion.
You agreed. Okay, you agree to the extent that that is Vidura's opinion. Fine.
Yes.
Now, there's 1,500
agree on
megawatts of solar that is in bureaucratic limbo. There is more, untendered projects totaling, including the 1,500 megawatts of solar, about 3,000 megawatts of energy that we could have by now. Why do we even have a power crisis? Because if these are all, sources that are complementary to each other, where you don't need to have a major, like a Kerawalapitiya 300 megawatt LNG combined cycle plant, if these projects that Vidura and Mr. Fernando are talking about are actually feasible and can be approved, why have they been stuck for so long, and why does the country even have a power crisis, regardless of the fact that the CEB cannot agree to the PUCSL's amended long-term generation?
There is a fundamental flaw in your argument. I think I try to emphasize this, because you are comparing a 300 megawatt LNG or 300 megawatt coal plant with a 300 megawatts of solar, which you cannot do, right?
Not just solar, about 1,500 megawatts of solar, mini hydro,
Biomass,
wind, biomass, all of that together.
There's HFO as well. There's 200 megawatts of HFO. There is
And it
no
can't be-
different to your coal plant or a gas plant.
So you can't compare all of that with 300.
I mean, okay, these are figures, of course, I have not seen the figures, so I do not want to comment on these figures, but if you say there is 1,500 megawatts, I mean, again, that's what he says.
So can I
just one final question, Deshan.
can I clarify this? Because these are not numbers on my imagination. I think Lakmal has the letter that
I have obtained this under RTI.
Lakmal. Do you also have the letter that Dr. Batagoda wrote? So
Yes, I
there's
do.
a letter in June that Dr. Batagoda wrote, which had
In June
1,015 megawatts. This is Dr. Batagoda, who is the
Right into the
secretary for
chairman of
media.
CEB.
Right into the chairman saying these 1,015 megawatts has to be built by 2020. Some plans 2019, some plans 2020.
When was that letter dated?
How much of this?
15th of June 2017.
Do you know? Can you guess how much of this 1,015 has been built now?
0.
None.
10 megawatts.
Better
That's
than
1%.
Just
1%.
one final question, Dr. Pereira, and then I'll yield the rest of the time to Deshan. You heard Kanchana speaking about how it's not a dispute between the PUCSL and the CEB. It's a dispute between the PUCSL and the CEB Engineers Union. Then Shehan was talking about various mafias. Now, at the beginning of this show, you were casting aspersions on the independence of the Public Utilities Commission. Now, trade unions serve a very important function. They're supposed to look after the welfare of their members. In as far as that role is concerned, do you feel that the CEB Engineers Union is independent?
Before I come to that question, I just want to make a comment about, what he attributed to Dr. Batagoda, who is the secretary of the ministry. Now, I can't speak for Dr. Batagoda, but you have to remember Dr. Batagoda in the recent years had written a lot of things of this nature. For example, he is the one who went to Supreme Court and gave an undertaking that Sampur will not be built. But no sooner that submission was made, the government took a decision that the energy mix of the country shall be 1/3 coal, 1/3 LNG, 1/3 renewable. So I rest my case. Then coming back to your question, can I?
Yeah. Is the CB Engineers Union independent?
We are independent of any politics. That much I can say. What other independence are you talking about?
Is it independent when it comes to its interests as far as the country's long-term generation expansion plan, the energy security of the country is concerned, as far as that is concerned?
Absolutely.
As far as when it comes to...
Absolutely. I don't think there's any instance where we have shown any bias. Of course, the individuals may have their own views, but we support as an entity the generation plan prepared by CB.
On that note, now we see many people calling for a conflict of interest register or a beneficial ownership register for members of parliament. Do you feel that transparency fosters accountability? Do you feel that as far as CEB engineers, or at least the top officials at the CEB is concerned, and even other state-owned enterprises like the Petroleum Corporation and even the Paddy Marketing Board and the Palmyra Marketing Board and so on and so on, do you think that we need to introduce by legislation beneficial ownership registers for the top officials in these institutions? Because that will clear up any doubts that the public might have.
I'm not sure I
about the
understand.
vested interest.
I'm not sure I understand the question properly.
So a beneficial ownership register lists all the interests, ownership interests in corporations, in companies that a person might have. Do you think that we need that kind of register for top officials?
Oh, absolutely, by all means. I think if that is what needs to be done to ensure transparency, by all means.
Thank you, Dr. Perez.
So Nadim, can I just interject here?
Just 1 minute, Dr. Alpanam, I'll come to you. But before that, I want to ask this question. I've had this in mind for a while now. Mr. Lakmal, I was having this discussion with you before we came into the show as well. Now, you see moving away from the government and the government's responsibility and the CEB's actions to ensure that these power crises do not take place. We discussed about the potential role that private companies could play. Now, there seems to be an overriding emotion in this country that anything that is private is not necessarily good. We've seen it in the education sector, we've seen it in healthcare at times, we've seen a lot of politicians raise their voice against it. Now, if we had that amount of competition, and if the public were given an opportunity to, go to a private company as a means of obtaining their power, that will also give the public an opportunity, if they think those prices are too high, to come back to the government sector company as well. Do you not think that as somebody from the private sector, that this will be beneficial to the public?
Definitely. I fully endorse your statement because you are referring to energy wheeling. This is happening widely all over the world. But in Sri Lanka, because we have only one utility, so they can dictate terms to anyone. And, here no responsibility, no accountability. It's very simple to say, from tomorrow you will have 3.5 hours power cut or whatever. What say do we have in this matter? In the other countries, if somebody does something like this, they'll be heavily penalized. But in this country, the people at large suffering because of the capacity issues of different parties, because them not having implemented things what was supposed to be implementing long time ago. It was very clearly told, very, very clearly told, rigorous implementation of this. This was told in 2016 March.
By whom is that?
This was a letter issued to Dr. Batagoda by PUCSL, and he takes action on it in 2017 June.
Okay.
So, by not implementing these things, now this is written to CEB chairman. I believe Dr. Batagoda knew his protocol, where to write to implement the projects. That is why he had written this letter.
Okay.
So, if this was not implemented by CEB, now the only thing what I have seen in this letter that's seen the daylight is the 10 megawatt what Vidura just mentioned, and the LNG which we still having a lot of issues, 300 megawatt LNG. So who is responsible for this? Now, Dr. Bhattagoda very clearly requests CEB chairman to attend to these things.
Okay.
So it's not done. So who is responsible for the today's power cuts?
Mr. Kanchan, I want to come to you now. From the Public Utilities Commission, it is your job to regulate and ensure that the public are being given these utilities that are essential to carry out daily life. Now, as a member representing that organization, what is your take? If healthcare can have private suppliers, if education can have it, why are we so against, or why are we so reluctant to let the private sector come in to offer power services? Because if you look at it, if you are a paying customer, if the private sector is offering more or charging more than the public sector, you will obviously stay with the public sector company. So the private sector does have to be competitive. Why are we reluctant? What is it? This goes back to the whole idea of the mafia that Shehan was mentioning in his question earlier. Now, the UK does it, a lot of European countries do it. Why is it that Sri Lanka is so adamant that we stick to one supplier who has clearly failed to live up to the required mark?
Now, the problem here is that, it is given in the legislation that the transmission licensee has to be CEB. CEB has to be given license to operate their distribution operations. So that is given in the legislation. So that is as decided by the parliament. Of course, if we had a, private operator, say, take for example, Noracholi power plant. Now it has a low plant factor, capacity factor, 67 or something like that. So it has to be typically it has to be 80% or more. Indian utilities are given those targets by the regulators. So if we had private operator operating on a power purchase agreement proper, we would have put penalties and made them operate it at 80% or so. So that liberty is not there to us. When we don't have a PPA, between CEB generation and CEB transmission, it's the same utility, same company. So then you won't find a PPA proper. So those difficulties we are faced with. Because
that is not entirely correct. You can impose norms on even CEB. You have the right to do that.
What is it that you can impose on the CEB now?
Yeah.
If the court order comes across.
There seems to be a dispute even now as you speak.
Yeah.
So we're going for a short break.
No, what he's saying is entirely wrong, because they have the right to impose penalties as well as norms on CEB.
Anyway,
What's the point? The penalty is...
If there's no point, of course, you are not doing a job. Now you are taken CEB to courts. So...
That's why. We are taking options. We are taking options. What's the point of putting penalties where the CEB itself will be paying one hand to the other? What's the point?
That is why they have made provisions in the law for you to take CEB or any other entity to courts. And
now, do you agree when I said that we have a dispute?
Yeah.
Well, I just heard Dr. Susatha Perera agreeing to the PUCS's decision to take them to court.
Anyway, we need to go for a short commercial break. At least we were able to prove a point that there is a dispute between the two parties. At least. We're now going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the final round with Lakmal Fernando, Secretary of the Solar Industry Association. Lakmal, let's leave aside all this that we discussed so far. Let's talk about the future. Where do we stand in terms of the future of this nation, in terms of energy? Is it secure? Is it not secured? Or is it uncertain?
Right now, the situation is not very certain, because there are ad hoc proposals coming up. For the last few months, we have seen a number of ad hoc proposals being brought in. And we have been requesting the ministry to get to the drawing board and, come to an understanding of what is the right buying price for energy. Instead of doing that, what they have done was they have just gone ahead and said, okay, this is my cost, you have to supply under that. So that kind of policy is not going to take us anywhere. That's number one. And when the entire world is moving towards renewable energy, and when we have given a very clear commitment, by 2030 we are going to be 50% renewable. So we should work towards it. Just having words is not going to take us anywhere. So for us to get to 50% renewable energy by 2030,
30, what is our plan? We don't have a plan. So I think we should work on it. And of course, wind and solar is very, very strong in Sri Lanka. And there is enough private sector investments who are, from this country, who will be very willingly investing in this country, where the money will remain in this country. So government should promote these kind of investments. I'm not saying, large projects like 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts projects should be ruled out. Yes, but they also should be there. But equally, there is a wider segment of small and medium scale entrepreneurs who wants to get into this business, who are willing to invest their money, hard-earned money, and government should look at them as from a complete different angle and promote it.
Thank you very much, Lakman Fernando, Secretary of the Solar Industry Association. I now move attention to Kanchana Sirivardhana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Kanchana, at least now, will the dispute between the CEB and the PUSL come to a complete halt? Will there be a truce? And will both organizations, including the PUSL, start thinking about the future of Sri Lanka? Will that happen in the next 12 months, next 2 years, next 5 years, at least the next 20 years until we resolve this crisis that we are seeing at present? Or will it keep dragging?
Now, as I
dragging
think
and dragging
he himself told, Dr. Pedras himself told, this issue is not a result of whatever we have as, dispute, as you say. Of course, we have not closed our doors. We are open. We have not, made enemies with CEB. It's actually other way around. CEB or CEB Union has, taken action, not, cooperating with us maybe. So, but the core issue here is not implementation of the plans, as we all agree. And as a regulator for us, what we see is that there's a set of plans, there's a timeline defined in the plan, and it is the task of the transmission licensee, which is CEB, to go ahead and bid it. And nobody can stop them, because they will buy power from a private party or maybe government collaborated project, but they can bid. So they are, if you look at the plan that was approved in 2018, we had 320 megawatt oil power plants to come online in 2018. So they should have gone ahead and bid it. Why didn't they do it? So that's my question.
Kanchana, very quickly, can the CEB disconnect power without a warning to the general public?
No.
They can't?
Because that is there in the license, condition 30 of the transmission licensee. They have to get our approval, prior approval, before such a scheme is implemented.
When this issue cropped up before, just a couple of weeks ago, the CEB did not notify the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka with regard to an electricity disruption. Did they or didn't they?
They didn't.
Right. Thank you very much. Kanchana Sirivardhana, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Dr. Susantha Pereira, Deputy General Manager of the CEB, also the past President of the Engineers Union of the Ceylon Electricity Board. Why did the CEB disconnect power without getting the approval of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka?
Well, the answer is very simple, because we are short of about 300 megawatts, so we had to somehow manage the system, and we had to disconnect 300 megawatts. Even today, we are doing that.
And the CEB could not even send an email or a letter or a telephone call and inform the PUSL about such shortage?
Well, that was a decision taken by the CEB management to inform or not to inform. If that is wrong, of course, now the matter is in court, so I think it will be resolved by a court decision. But let me also make some comments on what this gentleman said about, we are not following the directives given by the secretary to the ministry. Okay, I don't want to bring in names, today it will be Dr. Bhattagoda, tomorrow it will be someone else. But the fact remains that if a secretary gives a directive and if it is not followed, he is the chief accounting officer. There are lots of powers that he can exercise. for some reason, if he had not followed up, but I'm just basing everything on what he just said. I have not seen these letters. I have not, gone into the matter. No, I don't see that because I just take your word for that, right? But if that was not done, I think somebody has to be held accountable. I certainly agree with him, right? That has not been done. So if it is CEB, so be it.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Susantha Pereira, Deputy General Manager of the CEB. But one final question. Ravi Karunayaka, the Minister of Power and Energy, said that there won't be any power cuts starting the 10th of April. So can we take his word?
I think that's,
because
I should not speak for the minister, but all I can tell you is that there are certain measures that are being implemented. I think we all talked about the emergency power and in extension of these two contracts. Those two plants are already running and supplying energy.
So can I ask the Public Utilities Commission, Kanchana, whether Ravi Karunayaka has informed you all officially, because the CEB seems not, I don't think the CEB will officially inform you all that there is no power cuts from the 10th of April. Has the minister at least told you all officially that?
To my knowledge, there's no such communication.
So, Dr. Susantha, that means we will still be having power cuts during the Tamil and the Hindu New Year, or the Hindu and the...
No, certainly not during the Tamil and Sinhala New Year.
Not those 2 days.
Yeah, not today. I mean, like he said, until about 22nd, anyway, the demand is, lower than the usual.
So after 22nd, we may...
No, after 22nd, of course, there are other factors that come into the picture. Now, for example, there are no water releases from the Mahavali reservoirs at the moment, but come 22nd, they'll start the irrigation releases. So
no,
that will add.
My question is very simple to you,
yes.
Dr. Pereira. Are we going to have power cuts after the 10th of April?
Well, at the moment, we cannot say that because then
we might have power cuts after the 10th of April.
Well, the decision, as you heard from the minister, is that we will not have power cuts. So we'll
but
work
the CEB has to technically inform the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka that there are not going to be power cuts. So that information has not gone to them yet.
Well, I'm sure Minister that discussed with the people concerned.
Right. I don't think I think there is much more than a love-hate relationship between the CEB and the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. So I leave it at that. Finally, Dr. Vidura Panava, energy sector specialist. Vidura, electricity tariffs, are we going to see an increase? Are we going to see a decrease? Or are we not going to have electricity at all, so we won't have to pay the bills by year 2020? Where do we stand?
Well, because of the power cuts, your bill is definitely going to be coming down.
I guess so. I'm waiting. They came and gave the bill a few days later. So
we need to think about this in the medium to longer term as well. We can't just think about short term. There's a fundamental flaw in the CB planning process because the CB generation planning is done in dollars with a constant exchange rate. Right? So in the plan you say is the same in dollar, but because of the exchange rate depreciation, your price is going to go up. So long as we are working with fossil fuels, whether it's coal, diesel, thermal oil or natural gas, because of the exchange rate depreciation, if all other things remain constant, the price will go up. Only thing where the price will not go up is renewable energy. Why? Because renewable energy in Sri Lanka is contracted in rupees. So we are talking about a rupee tariff. So unfortunately, the CEB planning process does not recognize it because even though we are in Sri Lanka, do all our transactions in rupees, you have a dollar rated generation plan. So unless we fix these type of flaws, we will not see that the plan that we are contracting is going to take up our price. There is a second problem. Now, last time when CEB gave a plan, PUCSL changed it and we had a complete problem because the union refused to cooperate and we had all kinds of issues. What is the situation now? CEB has given a plan to the board of directors of CEB. This plan is not being approved. Why? Because the plan does not have what the minister wants. Right? Now, they will hold on to the plan until the CEB changes the plan and gives what the minister wants. Now, I'm waiting to see if the CEB Electrical Engineers Union protest against this, so it's only when PUCSL does they have a problem. Now what is in the new plan? What does the minister want? Minister wants 3 extra large-scale power plants. Why? I don't know. One reason I can think of is maybe he doesn't trust Norocchola not to fail, so he wants to back up. So this is the first country in the world where major power plants are served with a backup reserve. Right? Now if we build that plan, I can guarantee you, you're going to see your electricity bill goes up. Guarantee you. Because why? We are keeping additional capacity on standby, paying capacity charges, paying interest charges. There's your bill. Go on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vidura Panava, energy sector specialist. I thought at least I can leave tonight with some optimism, but there you go. A lot of pessimism at the end as well.
Put some solar on top of your roof. That's the only way.
And then I will have to face the same crisis that you're facing. A 3-hour power cut means I won't be able to even use that power, Vidura. Is that
that's why I think the minister is going to put some backup power for this.
Anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Vidura Panava, energy sector specialist, for joining us this evening on the show. Kanchan Sirivardhan, Director, Tariff and Economic Affairs, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Lakmal Fernando, Secretary to the Solar Industry Association of the country, and also Dr. Susantha Pereira, Deputy General Manager of the Sri Lanka Electricity Board. Please do not think that we want to put you on the spot tonight on the show, but the objective was to keep the public informed about the crisis that is happening in the country. And I hope
no problem.
Take everything in good faith, Dr. Pereira. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on the show on Face the Nation. And thank you very much, Shehan. Thank you very much, Deshan. And thank you very much, Nadeem, as always, for joining us this evening on the show. I'll leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. Then again, how can you even dream when you have power cuts? Anyway, take care and good night.